Hi, Darin. How are you?
I'm good, Siddharth. Happy to see you again.
Yeah, likewise, man. I'm really enjoying our conversations, and especially today's topic is gonna be once again very interesting, especially a woman's financial contribution in relationships, power, value, and evolution. And what I wanted to know from you, can you give us more insights into this line of thinking?
Yeah, Siddharth, money in a relationship, sitting and having a cup of coffee with somebody, inevitably the conversation moves to relationships, and there's always the conversation about money in relationships. So it's a sticky point, and very controversial. And even in today's conversation, I might get myself into a little bit of trouble, but we'll deal with that as we go along. So, yeah, in the movement and in the book, in particularly, I write about well, I have some characters in the book, and I try to bring out this concept of a woman's contribution in a relationship, and I'm talking here about committed relationships where we're trying to encourage people to have these uncomfortable conversations about money early in the relationship rather than at the stage where the relationship is kind of collapsed and then there's all these arguments about it, right? And one of the points I raise or I try to bring to people's attention is this conversation about when you're in a relationship, and it doesn't matter which of the options you choose. And when I talk about options, I'm talking about whether you decide to go into a relationship in the typical community of property, or where you go in and say, okay, what's yours is yours and mine is mine, and let's keep this thing separate. Irrespective of those two, somewhere in the relationship, post the commitment date, there is going to be financial contributions that cross this divide. If the two of you are living together and you need to buy a microwave, somebody's got to pay for the microwave. When you go out and buy groceries, you're going to buy one bag of toilet paper. So somebody's going to pay for that. Somebody's going to pay for the domestic help. Somebody's going to pay for the gardener, etc., etc. So somewhere in this thing, you got to start having conversations about uncomfortable stuff. And what we're finding, Siddharth, is that generally people will go in, a couple will sit down and say, all right, I'm going to pay for A, B, and C assets and whatever the case might be, and you pay for that. And in the beginning, that seems nice and fair. What we are discovering from our research that inevitably, and of course I'm generalizing, so please don't shoot me down for this, that you'll find that the bigger earner in the relationship kind of does the heavy lifting. They say, all right, I'm going to pay for the cars, the house, all this big stuff, the so-called big stuff, and you pay for the smaller things. You buy the food, you pay the kids' school fees, you do all those things. I'll do the heavy lifting. And we don't kind of sit down and say, what are those things actually worth? And when we do that and split the cost that way, what do we do if at the end of the day things go wrong? So here it goes. We get into a relationship. He says, and I'm picking on him here, for example, because I'm a male, I can do that. And I say, okay, I'm going to pay for the cars and the house and the insurance and all this big stuff. And you pay the maid and buy the food. And when the relationship ends, I say, okay, cheers. You go with what you brought. I'll go with what I brought. And the house, by the way, is mine. And then you sit back and say, oops, he walks away with a whole lot of value. He walks away with assets that he's paid for, but that appreciated in value. Yeah, fair enough. She enjoyed living in the house, but he enjoyed the food and the clean house that she paid for. But when she walks away, all of those things are disposed of. The food's gone, the maid's gone, the house is clean. She walks away with nothing. He walks away with the house. So somewhere we're saying to people, you got to kind of start thinking a little bit smarter now. Think about when you have to contribute, how you're going to do it, and make sure that it is fair. And of course, I talk about this concept of fairness and equitable. So it's all in the book. We're not going to talk about that today. But that's kind of what I'm hoping people start doing is say, let's have all these uncomfortable conversations before we really have to. And let's have them in the hope that one day we never have to get to that point. But if we do, we've sorted it out, while we're still on honeymoon, not when we are killing each other, because then it gets really ugly. So that's the background and the context to what I'm trying to do is to encourage people to say early on in the relationship, have these conversations.
All right. Before I continue with my questions, there's already a live comment question here for you. If you're okay with me bringing it out to you now.
Absolutely.
All right. This is from Resh Chitan. Hi, Darin. I always say that couples should be transparent in a relationship before marriage and commitment. Understanding plays a vital role.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the question. This whole concept of transparency, money is we make it like a taboo subject. We say, oh, it's personal. You can't have that conversation. I commit to you in every aspect. I'm going to communicate with you. I'm going to share the God you serve. We have similar interests. We're going to have these kids. We're going to share a name. We're going to do all of these. Hey, but you know what? My money. Don't go there. You're gone too far. And it's the thing that causes all the problems. So if you're going to be transparent, as our listener says, you've got to be transparent about everything, man. My argument is if you take your clothes off in front of somebody, open your wallet the same way. Be transparent about everything. So I love the question. Transparency is everything. I fully agree with the listener, 100%.
All right. How has the role of a woman's financial contribution in relationships evolved over time, especially for mothers?
Oh, okay, right. So this is a big one, Siddharth. If you go back to the era prior or just after World War II and in the 60s, in the flower power era, it was an era in our existence where men were the gatherers, they were the hunters, they were the providers, and women, kind of were the domestic caregivers. They did that. And you'll remember our great grannies, they lived like that. There was no anti-nuptial contract. There was this total understanding that everything was in community or property. I married you, you took care of the nest. I married you, you were the provider, you do that. And there was never a conversation about what happens if we get divorced. And even if they did, they kind of split everything 50-50. So there was drama, of course, but there was a lot less than we have today. Along comes the kind of 60s. We go into this thing where women start identifying that they make a bigger contribution, and we've changed things, and thank God for that. And so, we've evolved to where we are. However, there are certain things that we have to be clear about. Women can only do certain things, and men can only do certain things. Now, I'm sure the women are going to want to kill me, but men can't have babies. And so the role children play in a relationship is where the rubber meets the road and where things start getting a little blurred in this kind of mindset of yours is yours and mine is mine. Because what I kind of tried to argue and bring across, the point I tried to make is that as a man, you go into a relationship and you sit down and you say, right, we're going to get married and I want to have 2 kids. And those kids add a tremendous amount of value to both parties. I'm a dad, and I can say this from a lot of experience that my children are everything to me. I work for them. It's we work, and at the end of the day, we say we're going to leave this to our kids and leave. So our children are really important in our lives, and they add a lot of value to our lives. Now, in my life, and I think for a lot of men, we go into these relationships. And our career path is not compromised when we decide to have children. Why? Because I don't fall pregnant. I don't bear the child. I don't breastfeed. This is where we are different. But my partner has to do that. Now, when she has the baby, when she falls pregnant, when she's got to breastfeed, her life to some extent is compromised. So while those informative years of that child is happening and the mother's doing the things that I can't do, unless you adopt a child, it might be different, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about, in a typical relationship where the woman has the children. I can't do those things, but my career carries on. But my success, a part of that value add is because this woman made a sacrifice. She compromised herself. She did that for both our benefits, and I benefited. So if we enter a relationship with the mindset of, what's mine is mine and yours is yours, and generally you're going to find that there's the kind of thing about, what happens when we accrue assets in the relationship. You're going to have some decision, whatever that is, and that's not what today's topic's about. But the value that's added post the commitment date has to take into consideration the value that woman brings to the overall balance sheet or the assets of that relationship by the fact that she bore the child or the children. She compromised. And so I argue, and I'm going to get a whole lot of pushback, I know that you should put a value to that child's life. You should put a value to it and say, okay, you bought a house, you bought a car, you did all of those things, you got these fancy investments, you did all of that. But hey, I gave you a child. Now, what's that child worth? This is stuff we don't do. And so there's a thing called a VSL. It values life, okay? And it quantifies the economic figure that we should be putting on life. Now, this is not me saying this. This VSL thing, it's called the value of statistical life. And there is a US government agency. This agency is called FEMA, and it stands for the Federal Emergency Management Agency. What they've done is they've kind of looked at this concept of the value of life, and they've put a range to it. And they say life is worth anywhere between $1 million and $10 million. That's throughout the world. And from an American perspective, they peg it at $7.5 million. So if you're a woman listening to me today, I'm saying, take your children, say I have 2 or 3 kids or whatever I've got. And if I peg them at a number, and let's, for the argument of today's conversation, take the lowest number. So my partner has 2 kids with me, and she should argue that on the balance sheet, she's contributed $2 million. Now let's round that off and call it $20 million per child, or 20 million rand, sorry. So she should say, on the balance sheet from the time we got together, I've accrued 40 million rand with my 2 children. Add all that in, 20 is my responsibility, 20 is yours. Put it all in the pot. And when we kind of split up, I want my half of that and you take your half of that. Of course, you can't split the children, but whatever the arrangement is. So what I'm arguing, Siddharth, is that a woman's contribution financially, when she has children in the relationship, that's for the benefit of both the parties, has to be quantified somehow. People will argue that maybe the Americans are, take it over the top and all these organizations are wrong, but whatever it is. But one thing I don't think we can argue with is that the value is zero. You can't tell me my children have no value. So there's a value to it. And more importantly, that value is derived because the woman who can do things I can't do made a sacrifice. She compromised her life for whatever time period it might be. And that compromise added value for both of us. And therefore, that has to be taken into consideration. So that's kind of the what I'm arguing in the book when I talk about unpack this thing and let's have the uncomfortable conversations early.
Yeah, that's interesting, eh? Why the woman's financial input often undervalued or emotionally overlooked in partnerships and families?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to this thing. Who is providing the assets and how do you look at it? So as men, we can't do the stuff the woman can do. And generally speaking, and I'm generalizing, of course, if you're in a relationship and you are both contributing and you're both working like most moms are today and fathers, and you are contributing, you have to have a conversation about what I've just described. But what happens is that when the woman does what she has to do simply because the men can't do that, we don't take that into consideration and we undervalue it. And to
Mm.
some extent, the women are faulty also because they keep quiet and they accept it, and they shouldn't.
Oh,
So they should look and say, actually, my worth is more than just this. And then there's those super powerful ones that will do everything that we've described, have the kids do that, and in a compromised environment, give birth to the children, raise them, bounce back, and still contribute more than the men. And then if
mm,
that relationship goes sour, you get these men that still kind of climb on them and want to grab, more than their share. And that's what we've done as a society. Now I'm saying right up front, start off and have that conversation. And from a woman's perspective, particularly, say, this is my worth. This is what I bring to the party. And this is what I want you to view me as from a financial and a material contributing perspective. Okay. Now, even if you one of those women who say, or in the relationship you agree, she's going to be the domestic executive, she's going to stay at home, she's going to take care of that, and a lot of us do that. We cannot do that and not put a value to it, because that's what we've done over the years. And the one party goes off, does all the hunting, and then they say it's all mine, and she takes all the kid, or the other party does all the caregiving, and there's no material value to it. And when you're sitting in a divorce court, that separation or settlement agreement has rands and cents on it, and it talks about list the assets, and
mm.
we'll list the microwave, the car, and the house, but we won't list the value you added by making sure that we both benefited from it. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get people to do, and particularly women. And for us men, Siddharth, is to also sit back and say, you know what? My mother added value. I saw that. And so when I choose a woman, I'm going to treat her the same way as I would my mother and see her value in that light.
All right. Okay, my final question is, how can financial contribution affect power dynamics and decision making within a relationship?
Yeah, no. This power thing is a big thing, and in the book and the movement, I unpack it. I think quite beautifully, and I encourage people to go through the detail. But let's just chat about it briefly. Um, Inevitably, the person holding the purse strings has the power. You see it in work. You see it everywhere. Donald Trump sits with the most powerful position in the world. And when our president went and met him, Cyril came out and he says, this is a powerful man. And he's powerful because he holds the purse strings. That American economy is what it is. In a relationship, it is the same. The person that's making the bigger contributions inevitably sits on the right side of the power scale. Now, we have to have a conversation, because if you, in the absence of a conversation, that power imbalance will take its natural course, right? And I often hear people saying, if they are alone and they need to do something, they'll say, I have to consult my other half to get a decision about that. And then I'll say, in your relationship, do you not have the power to make a decision about something? I said, I do, but not big things. He can decide. So I say, okay, but if your husband was here or your wife was here and you were not here, could they decide? Then they say, actually, you're right. They do. So, and everybody kind of accepts it. Why? Because that other party is making the bigger contribution. And so you find yourself submitting subconsciously. And through that submission, it starts playing itself out in many other aspects of your relationship. You find yourself submitting for stuff that you shouldn't be, simply because the power balance is wrong. But the power balance is wrong because you've been silent about it. You've chosen not to talk about it. And you might be unfortunate that you might have a partner who can easily abuse and take advantage of that power position. You might be lucky where you find somebody that's, really emotionally intelligent, they're sensitive, they care a lot, and they won't take advantage of that power imbalance. But majority of the people are going to do that, particularly if you allow it. So I'm arguing with people, have the conversations early and sort out the power imbalance. And in particular, you spoke a little bit earlier about the buxometer. Have a conversation about how will we make decisions in this relationship from a financial perspective. Do we consult? Do we have conferences? How do we go about it? Because in the absence of the conversation about the decision making, the power imbalance automatically kicks in, and you might not like the outcome. And then you're going to deal with it in an environment where the gloves are off. I'm saying don't do that. Have the conversation early. So power imbalance, big thing in a relationship. So I certainly encourage people to talk about it.
Yeah. All right, got to say once again, thanks for your time, and I look forward to our next topic. And happy Christmas for you tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you very much, and to all our listeners, I hope they also have a good Christmas and a peaceful one. And over the gammon and the turkey, start having conversations about who cooked the food and who bought it, so that our relationships are a lot better. And then also, more importantly, if the kids are around the table, they must sit there and say, "Hey, you know what? I'm worth $1 million or more, and put me on the balance sheet." So let's hope that we make a positive contribution to that Christmas party. And good luck to all the listeners, and a Merry Christmas to all the Christians celebrating Christmas.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Siddharth.